Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and on the docket, Swiss stage is over. We say goodbye to 6 more teams. Europe and North America's positions have switched all of a sudden. The meta seems pretty stable, and a pretty good bracket stage draw. That and more. This Vision Denial. Let's go. Oh my goodness, the Swiss stages is done. The meta seems stabilized too. Lane swaps for better advantages, but only for a couple of minutes. And quite frankly, a fairly stock standard expectation given the draws of everything. But before we go on, let's take a look at all of these particular best ofs, because I'm pretty sure most of them have been best of 3s at this point that were remaining, regarding the leftover teams. Now, if you're unfamiliar, I take a look at all of the best of 5s from every particular participating region going into Worlds, as well as all of the games in the international tournament. If you want to see them as I watch them and review them, I have a link to the TikTok down below for what that looks like. Without further ado, before we break down the teams that we have to say goodbye to, let's take a look at those particular series from the Swiss stage, which honestly were pretty good, if still somewhat expected. So let's take a look. Congrats to Top Esports on qualifying to the bracket stage. Dplus still not finding late game proficiency hurts them. There are moments of their early game that we witness as part of their specialty, such as coordination, macro plays, answering through neutrals, but they face off against an opponent that matches them and even surpasses them, leaving them in a situation where they cannot play to the late game against a team who also knows how to play the late game. This issue needs correction if they want to get out of the Swiss stage. Now, Top Esports for their part demonstrate why there was such a high expectation from them. Incredible coordination, neutral approach, macro plays, ballooning of leads for every stage of the game. Now that said, the bizarre micro errors and overzealousness and aggressive plays nearly cost them game 2. And if they had faced any other team that could play the late game at their level, this might have looked very different. And let's hope that this kind of error doesn't repeat in the quarterfinals. My MVP for the series is 369s, who only rolled 9s and controlled each skirmish excellently. This was round 2-1 of the Swiss stage. Dplus Kia, the 3rd seed of the LCK, versus Top Esports, the 2nd seed of the LPL. Congrats to Homolife Esports on qualifying to the bracket stage. FlyQuest managed to impress me this series. From macro contest to proactive skirmishing and coordination, this showing is something to behold out of this squad whose expectations were fairly low. But between the inconsistent ballooning of leads and playing all 3 games from behind, especially early in, it wasn't enough to be a convincing win against them, but it wasn't a convincing loss either. As when proper leads were held, they kept the pace and tempo firmly in their control. Now, Homolife, for their part, really need to reevaluate their preparation process. There seemed to be a lot of more disrespect than usual, not really giving space and room for the skirmishing power of their opponents until game 3. And even then, their overzealousness and bizarre micro errors peeked through. But their early game proactivity, neutral approach, and ballooning of leads meant that it was almost assured that they'd succeed in this series. Almost. But the doubts make this a large concern for their prospects in the bracket stage, and that needs to be corrected. My MVP for this series is Viper, whose skirmishing power gave FlyQuest so much trouble. This was stage 2-1 of the Swiss stage. FlyQuest, the 1st seed of the LCS, versus Homolife Esports, the 1st seed of the LCK. Congrats to T1 on qualifying to the bracket stage. G2 really tried their best with some solid coordination, proactive macro plays, proper understanding of their win conditions, and some strong vision play. This was just a game of inches and clutch factors, and when things mattered most, they struggled to close out games they held control of, and part of it is either on them, as they struggled to find convincing leads, and other parts are from T1, who are playing these small moments that much more consistently. Now T1 on their end are playing more and more to the level as we expected, but quite frankly, it's a little dicey here and there. The macro approach, neutral plays, strong win conditions, and simple drafts all tie together for a convincing show of force, saying that T1 is not just improving, but improving at a rate that we could see them get there the whole way through the tournament. But their weird micro errors still persist, bizarre overaggression and overzealousness still abound, and we find a team who still relies on their clutch factors a little too much. My MVP for this series is Zeus for how much he scattered G2 and gave his squad space to play. This was round 2-1 of the Swiss stage. G2 Esports, the first seed of the LEC, versus T1, the fourth seed of the LCK. We say goodbye to Paris Saint-Germain Talons Esports. They had an impressive showing in this series with some incredible coordination and early game approach towards neutrals and vision. They did a lot to push their opponents to the limit in unexpected ways, but the inconsistent ability to balloon leads and apply pressure around the map with some overzealous skirmishes and bizarre micro errors leads to a team that can only push a team's limit so far, but really never break past them. Bitty for their part continue to show worrying signs about how we expect them to perform. Their skirmishing and coordination mixed in with their ability to balloon leads did wonders this series, but it was touch and go at any given point. Their proactivity wasn't as strong, so many strange macro errors as a whole, and if they want to get past the Swiss stage, there's a series that need to be polished. Like, so many things need to be polished to their approach from the early and mid game to really get their strengths that they had during playoffs. Otherwise, we might not see them get through. My MVP for this series is Ben, who leveraged the skirmishing strengths against PSG so fantastically. This was round 1-2 of the Swiss stage. Paris Saint-Germain Talons Esports, the first seed of the PCS, versus Bitty Gaming, the first seed of the LPL. We say goodbye to Fnatic. They couldn't show us any consistency to the play. We find some moments of brilliance around neutrals, coordination, especially in the early game, as a solid understanding of their win conditions and how to punish their opponents, but at no point do we see them ballooning leads convincingly, with play that is full of micro errors and bizarre macro choices. As a whole, Fnatic barely stayed in the tournament as long as they did, and it feels bad given the level of play that we expected from them. Weibo Gaming, for their part, are looking much better than they have all tournament so far, and yet they show us some incredible coordination, neutral approaches, ballooning leads nicely, and play to their win conditions to close out games excellently. But it doesn't seem like they had a lot of respect to the series for their opponents, especially in Game 1. And if they continue with the lack of respect and not playing with the simpler ideas to get their bearings in order, then we could see them eliminated from the tournament before even any bracket contention at all. My MVP of the series is Light for his consistent damage output. This was round 1-2 of the Swiss stage. Fnatic, the second seed of the LEC, versus Weibo Gaming, the fourth seed of the LPL. We say goodbye to GAM Esports, a force to be reckoned with, demonstrating excellent skirmishing, coordination, and ballooning of leads, as well as strong pressure applied across neutral approaches. But their consistency has always been a factor, and here it is no difference, especially during the early game. If they don't have their tools in place or even start to fall behind slightly, you can see them falling apart and struggling to come back from those situations. Because of it, they were always bound to struggle in the Swiss stage. Team Liquid, for their part, showed some incredible prowess. Kind of. From incredible neutral approaches, solid early game, proper approach to their win conditions, coordination, and of course their macro. But we see them play warm-up games. Why did it take this long to see a Team Liquid that didn't struggle to get decisive wins? Moreover, their hesitation around closing games and the pace of the game slowing down, even as they have 12+ K gold leads, still has me slightly skeptical that they'll succeed to qualify to the bracket stage. My MVP for this series is Core JJ, who managed to create space for his team while disrupting GAM. This was round 1-2 of the Swiss stage. GAM Esports, the first seed of the VCS, versus Team Liquid, the second seed of the LCS. We say goodbye to Dplus Kia, and congrats to Weibo Gaming on qualifying to the bracket stage. Now, Dplus keeps some strong early game approaches with questionable late game. fantastic read on win conditions, solid coordination, vision, and honestly, all the right tools and answers. But the lack of proactivity in the mid to late game, coupled with their strange macro choices and inability to push leads, meant that any opponent who caught them off guard during those stages or outplayed them in the early game would have their way during the entire game, which is what Weibo did. I don't know what happened after game 1, but the warm-up games need to stop from Weibo. They had some incredible control during all stages of play during games 2 and 3. Fantastic neutral approaches, coordination, skirmishing, macros. The team is just night and day pre and post warm-up. And it speaks volumes to the weight we expected from this team and their inconsistency. That just kind of has me wondering if they will ever correct this issue during the bracket stage or just fall short. My MVP for this series is Breathe, who created so much space for his team. This was round 2-2 of the Swiss stage, Dplus Kia, the 3rd seed of the LCK, versus Weibo Gaming, the 4th seed of the LPL. We say goodbye to G2 and congrats to Bitty Gaming on qualifying to the bracket stage. G2's consistency and reckless play do them in again this time. They hold some solid coordination and skirmishing, fantastic approach to macro and neutral plays, and solidly understand their win conditions, but inconsistent early gameplay, frustrating micro errors, and inability to read any plays when they are pressured by teams that know how to match them leads to a bitter end for the LEC reps. Bitty for their end really polished things enough to get this qualifications. They punish their opponents well, balloon leads incredibly, know how to play from behind, and have all that is needed as a team to be devastating, but it still seems like they are just kind of warming up. And it can only be so much warming up that exists before a team overtakes them, because the individual micro errors and hesitations alone should give many more concerns for this team's ability to move forward. But they are improving at a much faster rate than most of other teams. My MVP for the series is Elk for his insane skirmishing. This is round 2-2 of the Swiss stage. G2 Esports, the 1st seed of the LEC, versus Bitty Gaming, the 1st seed of the LPL. We say goodbye to Team Liquid and congrats to FlyQuest in qualifying to the bracket stage. Team Liquid's early game successes still shine here, especially in terms of macro approaches, neutral plays, and coordination overall, but the late game struggles, inconsistent ballooning of leads, and sometimes cocky plays meant that their ability to close out games despite any leads that have been accrued is just made harder than needed. And especially worse when they don't get any early leads at all. FlyQuest, for their part, played the late game incredibly well. Strong skirmishing power, solid understanding of their win conditions, proper adaptability when needed. Combine that with a strong ability to play from behind, and this is a flexible team you could get behind if they had any consistency with the leads they would get ahead. Game 3 showed us the kind of team that we would like to look from them, but the norm for FlyQuest is to play from behind and by default. This is, honestly, this will only cause issues as they head to the bracket stage, as they face teams who can pull off what they can do in the late game with more consistency to be able to play from early game also. My MVP for this series is Quad, who danced circles around Team Liquid during these skirmishes. This is round 2-2 of the Swiss stage. Team Liquid Honda, the 2nd seed of the LCS, versus FlyQuest, the 1st seed of the LCS. Goodness gracious. The theme at this point was mostly about consistency. Quite frankly, too many of these teams didn't spend enough time properly establishing the kind of consistency that was required to be able to properly play those lane swaps, to even balloon leads, to a whole bunch of slew of things. But it's not even all of the teams that qualified even to the bracket stage. Yes, they were better at it. Heck, some of them even improved, as of note of Bitty Gaming. But frankly, question marks are still around, like Weibo, uncertain of things. People are still already up in the air about FlyQuest, who don't seem like they're going to last much longer either. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take a look first at the 6 teams that we say goodbye to. And we say goodbye to Paris Saint-Germain, Talons, Esports. Honestly, this is probably as best as most people would have expected from them. Maybe an extra round depending on the draws, but probably not much further than this, really. There's a lot good to say about the performance. There are also a lot of really bizarre things. Why did it take so long for them to warm up to the level that we expect from them? Also, why was it that they were so consistent at pushing teams to the limits, but never quite eking it out? On top of the fact that they were just not as consistent about their leads as they really should have been to begin with. Bizarre micro errors, a lot of overzealousness, and it doesn't feel good, really, to see them end on this particular note, despite how well they approached it. Because they could have probably approached it even better if they had played to this level to begin with, which we knew this to be their starting level. And so they played on a deficit starting in from the tournament to ramp up to the level we expected them to be and then fail. And I don't know, this feels really weird for the PCS's send-off before they become APAC. I just kind of wish that, and I expect them to stick around and likely stay further. Definitely with a different look, as Maple has mentioned, retiring, possibly. I don't always trust these players to be truthful about it. But seeing this team be as consistent as they were within the region, it would not surprise me that with the reshuffling that they will still continue to be consistent and likely see them at the next international tournament, whatever that looks like. But I really want them to stop having warm-up games, because that really was the biggest issue here. We say goodbye to Fnatic, another team with consistency issues, but primarily from the fact that we know them to be much better than this. They showed solid understanding of their win conditions, good neutral approaches, a lot of coordination and skirmishing, but never ballooning any of the leads is really never a good look. Being completely all over the place and erratic in every stage of the game. I can't help myself but help think that Fnatic has had too many ups and downs for this to still be the grumbling that we get from them. I am hopeful that come the next international tournament, for whatever that looks like, that they'll have more of their shit together, because we've seen them face off against their compatriots in the LEC very well, but even then very inconsistently. And in the big stage, on the international stage, you need a lot more of it, and the ability to continuously improve. Some of the other teams with inconsistency issues improved. Fnatic stalled and stayed that way the entire time. And it just kind of feels bad, because we know they could have improved a lot more. So let's hope there's something that changes. We say goodbye to GAM Esports. And frankly, I love these guys, but this is another case of inconsistencies. Or to be more frank, how consistent they are. This is a great team with early game approaches, very strong proactivity, great skirmishing, a great amount of coordination, but come late game, it doesn't look as strong. And this isn't from a lack of being able to play the late game. They play the late game fairly well. It's just that their approach to playing the late game when they have great leads has a lot more gap for errors to happen. But they are regularly throwing themselves at the wolves just over and over and over again to hopefully just out-skirmish their opponents. And at some point, they should have learned the lesson very early in that we are facing off against a bunch of teams, a whole host of them who are probably going to be able to out-skirmish us regularly. So why try that? And they tried that with all of their opponents and wound up in this place. Now, to note, they lasted quite a bit of time. And for good reason. When a lot of these teams didn't expect their approach, they drowned. But that's not something you should be commending GAM for. That's something you should be scrutinizing the other teams. And as great as they are with their aggression, they really needed to be a lot more calculated than usual. And if this is still the same squad come next year, I'm going to hope, I really hope, that they will have a stronger approach to all of the gameplay, especially as APAC, they'll be able to be participating. Oh, GAM, what are we going to do with you? And we say goodbye to Dplus Kia. This is one of the few teams when eliminated it's not because of their consistency issues. In fact, this is a fairly consistent team with strong early games and terrible late games. They straight up do not know how to play the late game. If they have a strong early game, then that is fine. They'll be able to play through that, make it to the mid game, close out a game fast. Easy. And it's helpful that they have great coordination and a good amount of skirmishing, but that's to be expected at this point with the particular tournament. The thing that becomes a huge problem is that their late game just doesn't exist. Their proactivity disappears in the late game. Their strong coordination, gone. Their skirmishing, even, gone. So many more micro errors, a lot of bizarre macro choices. And this has been a problem with DK since their inception. When they first showed up on the international stage on their rookie year, like this, they qualified to the LCK, make it to Worlds, and then eliminated, if I remember correctly, in the semifinals. They make it very far, but they were always strong early game team, outpaces everybody, and then dies off in the late game. And frankly, this has to change. Not that they have to lose the early game, but guys, what is happening in the late game so badly that you just cease to understand how to play the game completely? Not great. Something's got to fix. Something's got to let go. I'm not sure what, but it's not a great look. And we say goodbye to G2 Esports. Now, this is the team when you think consistency issues, oh boy, the ceilings and troughs that this team brings to the table is enormous. Right, there is more. It's hard to really mention because this team has been with each other for so long. And so this has been a known issue for a regular amount of time. Usually they rest on the laurels that they have a stronger sense of macro play. And they do. They do have a stronger sense of macro play. But it only works so far as long as you don't get caught out. The amount of micro plays, which is the crux of their consistency issues, the amount of micro plays that go awry or they just get caught is astounding. The rate at which their quality of play versus the amount of mistakes and the amount of egregious mistakes is too high of a ratio at this point. This squad has been together for enough time that at this point they should know that it is no longer working for whatever their goal is. And if I was to make it an educated guess, many of these players are likely going to want to step down for the sake of the others to find places elsewhere and also for their careers to move forward better. If they stay again for next year, kudos, I guess. But it's very rare that teams who don't find any form of regular success in some shape stay together. And while they've won all of their titles in the LEC, the format to me means jack shit into their ability to actually compete, especially since the teams around them in the LEC are questionable at best, it seems, regarding consistency as a whole. And they're not excluded from this particular problem. And we say goodbye to Team Liquid. Oh boy, guys, come on. Not only are your early games not the 100% every single time, for some reason you've lost your ability to be consistent at your best gameplay. And more specifically, the consistency regarding the lane swapping. Because I think everything else is on just above board from Team Liquid. I would hope that we would stop with these teams that are strong early game but terrible late game and can't close. Like, great, whoop-de-doo. You know how to do openers within a game that's as complex and long-lasting as League of Legends, but, like, come on, guys. You need to be better at closing out games. This cannot continue. This is baffling at this point, especially with a team with this caliber that they have. They overfocus, they tunnel vision, they play their late game all over the place, and frankly, this was going to be worse for them if they made it to the bracket stage, which they almost did, but thank goodness they didn't. I really, really did not want them to keep going, especially since there was zero improvements all the way across the board. And this is another case where likely there's a lot that needs to be changed within this roster or within the organization before something really clicks about their approach to the late game. Because as it is now, it's just not good. We need to talk about this matchup here. We didn't get it in the Swiss stage, so it's hard to really mention how this would have shaken out. Because on the one hand, you would expect from history that, like, there's precedent to think that the LEC would be able to manage a win against the LCS. But this is the second year around that the LEC doesn't make the bracket stage. And in past references, when the LCS couldn't do so, we just touted them as being bad. Point blank. Regardless of the matchups, what was going on. Regardless of any of the context. Not regardless of any of the context. Regardless of some context to the situation. And I want to give credit where credit is due. The LEC teams had some rough matchups. G2 especially, who definitely was the best performing team. But let's be also equally frank here. Mad Lions really did awful. Fnatic also did not so great. And so to expect them that just because one of them might have ended up against an LCS team, that it would have been honky-dory, easy peasy, let's go. Woo! Ignores the fact that the LCS teams have been a lot more consistent across the board. Not good. Let's be real here. Neither of these teams sent their best. I.e., they did not have very many good teams to offer. But that there should be some reconciliation that the way in which we're viewing and approaching this rivalry between the two is that it's always been much closer than expected. That it's always have been a situation where the LCS probably shouldn't have felt bad for as long as it did, and the LEC should probably have not been as cocky as they have been. Especially in given years like 2018, where they did some of their best, also included a North American team that took out more Korean teams than the LEC did. But this is more of a prospect of remembering that the results themselves only tell a part of the story. And neither of these regions have sent very good teams for different reasons, but still not to the caliber that we should be expecting anything to be tremendous from the last Western team in the tournament. Oh boy. Next, we gotta talk about these guys, because this is going to be one region now, right? Heck, we're losing a lot of the VCS to put it in the PCS, putting in a whole smack dab amount of regions into the sucker. Their performances this year were good, roughly from the expectations that most of the world had. But I do not know how much that quality is going to change. There's a part of me that thinks that it's great that the split up is being reversed technically from the GPL that turned into the LMS and then turned into the VCS PCS split situation. And the they're adding in LJL, the Oceania, to be part of the region, kind of. There is a hopeful aspect that this will be good gameplay quality wise out of the Southeast Asia, out of APAC. But given the performances that I saw from every one of the representatives, I'm not so sure. In fact, I'm pretty sure we're going to lose a lot of the quirkiness and a lot of the fun styles from them. But those are my 2 cents off of seeing the last 2 teams go and seeing that this is the last time we're going to be seeing these regions as we know them at Worlds. So here's to hoping that you guys are going to be able to pull off something next year, as you'll have more seeds at least. Technically less. As we enter the bracket stage, there is a lot of swirling thoughts, a lot of emotions, a whole bunch of excitement, and a good amount of storylines that match last year. Granted, the only difference between this year and last year in terms of the bracket stage is literally just the North American representatives. If I look at Worlds 2023, the main event bracket stage include T1, LNG, Gen G, Bitty Bitty, and Weibo. 5 of our lovely, lovely contestants are back. The only difference here is that we've got KT in the place of Homo Life and JDG in the place of Top Esports, as well as FlyQuest in the place of NRG. A couple of expectations that people are likely to the word I'm trying to find here is be disappointed from predictions, so to speak, is that many of expected finalists are going to be facing off in round 1. I think that is to be expected given how close of a quality each particular region has been so far, especially between the LCK and LPL have been very close against each other. The LCS and the LEC have been close with each other. Everybody else very close with each other in terms of quality. So the spectrum itself is really nice. And so while the North American team is expected to lose, FlyQuest, let's be really frank here, I can see Gen G making it all the way to the end. The rest of the bracket is a little bit more uncertain. And mostly because LNG Weibo has been a very mixed back and forth. Homo Life and BD Gaming is going to be super interesting because those are the strongest regions, but whose performances have been the most rocky based off their seeding. And then top and T1 is going to be a bloodbath. There's a lot of back and forth that we can see from this. This is 100% the closest year that our bracket stage has ever been. And frankly, I am genuinely excited to see what happens. Because the meta seems to have stuck in a very specific place, very similar to everyone's playoffs meta, with the added benefit of a lot more mid lane picks and a lot less marksmen. But that could very well change. The sticking ground is that Swiss and play-ins are different, which are also different from bracket. The meta itself is only evolving based off of who your matchup is going to be. I have a strong feeling that there are not going to be a lot of changes. There might be some pocket picks that are going to surprise people, but not a whole lot of changes regarding people's approaches to the meta, especially with regards to lane swap, as they're not going to hot fix things, no. But those are my expectations, at least. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What have been your favorite Swiss stage moments? Which bracket matchup are you looking forward to the most, especially in the quarterfinals? I'd love to hear your thoughts and everything in the comments down below. We are officially halfway through done the tournament, at least lengthwise, not necessarily number of games wise. If ever any of you are curious about any of the stats that I use, got them in the description down below. Just kind of excited for everything, a little contemplative, and I'm hoping that this particular bracket stage is reminiscent to the 2018 one, or the 2021, or the 2021 one, where there's such genuine excitement. In fact, even the 2022, every year since 2019 has had an incredible bracket run. And I think this year will be the closest one we've ever seen, and I hope it is as good as any of those are, if not better. And I think it will be. Thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day. See you next time.